Chair, I can confirm you are live on YouTube.
Thank you very much. Is it now closed?
Yeah.
Yep, right. Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for attending today's meeting of the council. Can I remind members and public speakers that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live via YouTube. By attending the meeting, you are giving your permission to be recorded and live streamed for the meeting. Please ensure your video is switched on during the meeting and microphones are turned off until invited to speak. If you experience problems and need to turn off your camera, please let us know in the chat function and confirm at the start of each item where decisions are to be taken that you can hear the debate. If you need to get attention during the meeting or would like to ask a question or point of order, please use the chat function and state what you'd like to ask. I will then invite you to address the council. Please do not interrupt other members. When addressing the council, please speak clearly and concisely and get straight to the point. If for any reason you need to leave the meeting, please also let me know using the chat function. Otherwise, do not bung up the chat function with chat. It makes it more difficult to spot who wishes to speak. For information, the monitoring officers join the meeting remotely. When I need to take legal advice, I will go into mute and contact the officer. The Democratic Services Officer will now conduct a roll call to check who is present at the meeting. Could you please switch your microphone on, confirm your attendance, and then switch it off again? Thank you.
Councillor Ayres.
Present.
Bambridge.
Present.
Beale.
Present.
Bondi.
Present.
Blunt.
Present.
Bone.
Present.
Bauer.
Present.
Bubb.
Present.
Bullen.
Present.
Collingham.
Present.
John Collett.
Present.
Sandra Collett.
Present.
Crofts.
Present.
Dark.
Present.
Devereux.
Present.
Dickinson.
Present.
Gidney.
Present.
Hipperson.
Present.
Holmes.
Yeah.
I've had apologies from Councillor Howard. Howland.
Present.
Howman.
Present.
Hudson.
Present.
Humphrey.
Present.
Jones.
Present.
Joyce.
Present.
Kemp.
Present.
Kirk.
Present.
Coombs.
Present.
Lawrence.
Present.
Lawton.
Present.
Long.
Present.
Lowe.
Present.
Manning.
Present.
Middleton.
Present.
Moriarty.
Present.
Morley.
Present.
Nash.
Present.
Knockholds.
Present.
Parish.
Present.
Patel.
Present.
Ratcliffe.
Present.
Rose.
Present.
Rust.
Present.
Rice.
Present.
Sampson.
Present.
Sandal.
Present.
Vikings.
Present.
Squire. She has indicated she may be late, Chair. Story.
Present.
A. Tyler.
Present.
D. Tyler.
Present.
DeWally.
Present.
Whitby.
Present.
Wilkinson.
She sent her apologies.
Apologies.
Margaret does.
That's everybody, Chair.
That's everybody. You will remember at the last meeting, having only just learnt of the fact, I informed the council of the passing away of ex-councillor Peter Wilkinson. Not only was he a borough councillor, but he was also a county councillor and a founder member of the Freebridge Community Housing Board. I would now like to ask for a minute's silence which will be ended by Father Adrian saying prayers. So I'd like to start that now, please. Thank you, councillors.
Let us pray. O God, our eternal Father, we give thanks for the life of Peter Wilkinson and his service to this borough and county. We pray for Margaret, our Deputy Mayor, as she mourns the loss of her husband, and also for Honorary Alderman John Lovelace, following the death of his wife Pam. May they and their families, and all who are bereaved, receive comfort and strength. We ask your blessing on Her Majesty the Queen and her government, on President Biden following his inauguration, and on the Mayor and councillors of this borough as they meet this afternoon. We continue to pray for all suffering from the coronavirus and its effects, for all on the front line in combating the pandemic. Grant us continued vigilance in keeping safe and resilience to withstand the challenges of isolation. May we bear with one another and treat each other kindly, that we may be encouraged to persevere. This prayer we offer through Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father Adrian. We now have item 2, apologies for absence.
I've had apologies from Councillor Howard and Wilkinson. Councillor Squire has also indicated she'll be late.
Thank you. The next item is the minutes of the last 2 meetings. Are you all happy that these minutes are a correct record of what happened at those meetings?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Are there any dissenters? Right, thank you. Declarations of interest. Please indicate if you have any declarations of interest for the items on the agenda this afternoon, please. No? Right, thank you. Item 5 is Mayor's communications and announcements. I do not have any, apart from with reference to our recent changes in standing orders. With your agreement, I'd like to bring item 10 after item 7 and before item 8. Do I have your agreement to do this, please? Any dissent?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 6 is urgent business. There is none. Item 7 is petitions and public questions. We have one, which I've got here somewhere. It's about the Tourist Information Centre at Unstanton. With the question, I'd like to take over the meeting, please, and speak. Can't remember who it is.
It's Yvonne Bridger.
Where's that? What's her name, sorry?
Yvonne Bridger.
Yvonne Bridger. Sorry, I haven't got your name to hand. Would you like to speak, please?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Good afternoon, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to raise this question with you today. Put quite simply, Hunstanton is our tourism magnet and the only seaside town in the borough's portfolio. The staff TIC in Hunstanton was closed down, as we all know, in the first quarter of 2020. Against a backdrop of COVID-19, this unjustified closure was effected with what we feel to believe unnecessary haste, which in turn precluded any form of public consultation or communication even with businesses or residents. It was presented to the town as a fait accompli, as a done deal. So further to the planned review of this situation by Councillor Nockholds over the coming weeks, will the leader of this council, the deputy leader, all councillors and all portfolio holders add their voices to those of the 2,233 petitioners who have used their voice to seek to restore a staff TIC to Hunstanton from 1st of April 2021, or as soon as is safely and legally possible to do so. Obviously, we understand the constraints. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, would you like to respond to this, Councillor Long?
Yes, indeed I would, and thank you for your question, Yvonne. It's I appreciate that there are those in Hunstanton that would like to see the immediate reintroduction of a staffed tourist information centre. As you will appreciate, back in the first quarter of 2020, we had the oncoming effects of a pandemic. At that point in time, we had to consider the safety of those that man such facilities as a tourist information centre. Dialogue was taking place between the portfolio holder and the town council, who I believe to be the representatives of the people of Hunstanton. Against the best information that we had at that time, we felt it important that we didn't put any member of staff at risk, and the Hunstanton Town Council took the decision to close the Tourist Information Centre. Now, moving forward to this forthcoming year. At this point in time, we have no way of knowing whether it would be safe to introduce a Tourist Information Centre from the 1st of April. Councillor Nockholds has given her assurance that this will be reviewed, and despite an almost £40,000 a year budget for providing the service, usage of the Tourist Information Centre has massively decreased in recent years, making its financial viability something that we will have to give due consideration to as we realign our budgets and expenditure going forward, and in light of the extra expenditure that we have made as a borough council during the pandemic. We're not alone in reducing this service, and we were very quick to provide an unmanned alternative, a facility that I know has seen visitors because it is monitored by CCTV, and obviously people have used that facility. This year's attendances to Hunstanton, with the circumstances of the sort of lifting of pandemic restrictions during the summer months, I think saw far more people visiting the town than probably was expected. Tourist information centres generally are a thing I would suggest of the past. Even major tourist towns and cities are deciding to withdraw manned tourist information. I would cite some examples. Oxford, Cambridge, and even Bath don't have now a manned tourist information centre. And so the provision of one has to be balanced against the financial cost and the perceived benefit that it brings, given the reducing numbers. But paramount to me is the safety of those that would be there to man it. Thank you.
Ms. Bridger, have you a supplement to your question, please?
Yes, thank you. I do. And thank you, Councillor Long, for your comments. And every single one of us appreciates that the situation in which we find ourselves is both current and real, needs to be managed in the way you have mentioned. Absolutely right. But it is being dealt with through the government's vaccination programme in Norfolk, as well as across the country. So as and when the brakes are eased off, stage by stage, we know safely, we have to be ready to bounce back safely in all sectors of life and business. So our question, just to sort of further a little bit more, is to ask the Borough Council of Kings Lynn and West Norfolk to have a funded plan in place for the staff TIC and the recovery of Hunstanton, your only seaside resort, for the future of the businesses in the town and for the employment, livelihoods and prospects of all who work in it, most of whom are on minimum wage, seasonal hours, etc. I do want to come back to you on the budget and just draw this to your attention.
Mr. Mayor, this is not a debate, this is a supplementary question.
Okay, here's my question.
At this point in time, the only part of the question that I've heard, I will just refer back to the previous answer that I've already given.
Yes, so thank you. May I just draw to your attention the expenditure on the TIC equated, the SLA equated to 0.24 of 1%. 0.24 of 1% of the total budget for 21-22. So the investment in a man-type TIC could realise all sorts of additional income. So I'll come to the question. We are not asking for a staffed TIC to open on 1st of April 2021. We'd be off our heads. But we are asking that a funded plan for a staffed TIC be agreed in principle before that date via Councillor Knockold's review, ready for the doors to open as restrictions ease. That is still the question. I know that some TICs are closed down, but I've got counter arguments on those, but it's not a debate, so I won't go into it.
Thank you for your question. Councillor Long, would you like to come back?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that the supplementary question was basically asking for reconsideration of the answer that I gave a few minutes previous, but I would reiterate the assurance that Councillor Knockolds has given when she's met with the Hunstanton Civic Society, who I think are the lead on this particular campaign to reinstate a staffed tourist information centre. And on that basis, that offer that she made still stands, and it will be reviewed in light of the improving situation that we have because of the vaccine and moving out of the pandemic. At this point in time, it is very difficult to consider that we'll be anywhere near a place where we can consider that in April, as vaccine rollout is not expected to hit all of the adult population until well into the autumn. And so consideration will be given pending on the safety of those staff that could be asked to operate from a tourist information centre.
Thank you, Councillor Long, for your response, and thank you, Ms. Bridger, for your question.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
We now move to item 10, which is going to be put after this item, which is the Cabinet Recommendation CAB 217, Council Tax Support. I invite Councillor Long to propose, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies, I'm not looking at the agenda, and I probably should be. CAB recommendation is that, again, we make our council tax support scheme available to members of the West Norfolk community. There has been the usual consultation exercise for this. It has also been to the Corporate Performance Panel and Cabinet, and obviously Cabinet's recommendation is the scheme be adopted. There are, of course, always claims and requests that the scheme is made more generous. Obviously, the scheme does as it has previously and protects those of retired age and also those with young children and the very most vulnerable in our society. However, it is and never was a fully funded scheme, and obviously to that ends, you would think at this time, when people are probably more likely to need help, that we suddenly could wave a wand and make it more generous. Unfortunately, we can't wave such a wand, but I give assurance to all councillors that on acceptance of this scheme, and obviously if we don't accept a scheme, we are in a position where we can't help anybody, but on acceptance of this scheme, there is additional government funding support to help the most vulnerable. That has already been utilised in payments that have been made and effectively creating reductions in people's council tax bills who are the most in need of that support. There is still residual funding from that, and we would continue to make that available it's a discretionary basis, but I don't think I've ever said no to one yet. So I would urge councillors to support this and be assured that there is additional help out there for people. And as I often do when we talk about council tax support scheme, I do ask people if they're having problems, difficulties, please do contact us, and we will obviously do what we can to help, given the circumstances that people will certainly find themselves in at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Have you a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Knockholes, do you wish to speak now, or would you like to reserve the right and speak later?
I'll reserve the right later. Thank you.
Right, in that case, we'd like to move on to Councillor Joyce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While we do have great sympathy with the council leader on this one, Labour cannot support the principle of this. This is an awful scheme. It came in along with the bedroom tax, the benefit cap, and the most vile and dehumanising of them all, the rape clause, all brought in by George Osborne, a multi-millionaire. It just simply is not feasible. It is awful to pass the buck on to local councils to bring in a scheme that varies up and down the country. As I said at the Cabinet, it should be abolished. The scheme itself should be abolished, and the government should fully fund any council tax benefits that they are. It's an awful scheme. The only thing that's missing from it is the workhouse. We really cannot support this on principle, although I personally do have sympathy with Councillor Long of it. What I will say is that next year we will take if I am the leader of the Labour group, which is not certain, I will take a very close look at this and see if we can actually find some money to be more generous. But this year we just cannot support it on principle.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Rust, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be unable to support this scheme because I have spoken in opposition to it from the outset. While I am heartened to hear the leader give his assurance that there is additional support to help those most in need, the fact that it's at somebody's discretion, and the leader of the council implied it was his own by saying, I have never turned anybody down, this doesn't provide me with the reassurance I need that those families most in need are going to have access to the support that is going to get them over this incredibly difficult time. We know that at this time, families are struggling to put food on the table. We have seen it not just in school holidays, but throughout the year. And the fact that these families aren't going to have some relief from which would have come from a fully funded council tax scheme leaves me embarrassed to be in this situation when I know that there are so many that are in need, and it's, I believe, our duty to help them over that need. So as I said, I won't be supporting this scheme because I have spoken in opposition against it from the outset. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rust. Councillor Howman, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard what the leader has said and I accept his position. But end of the day, I should be voting against this scheme because once again, it's a missed opportunity for this council to help thousands of West Norfolk families through hard times. We are, if you like, unfairly targeting people of working age. If you're of working age and have a low income or no income, you still have to pay 25% of your council tax. I would like to remind members that this is not a government scheme. Each council sets its own scheme. So some councils offer 100% assistance, others offer 90% because they want to see some contribution to services. As I said, this is an opportunity for the council to help families through an unprecedented financial crisis. This scheme is renewed every year, so it's not as if we're committing to years ahead on revenue. It can be looked at once a year, and if we can have even a temporary change, that would be a good thing. We could bring in a 90% scheme with very little work to reflect the pressures of COVID for the community. We're always hearing, and quite rightly, how much this council is doing to support businesses. So fine, so why not helping people? I think this scheme should go back to the Cabinet for a complete overhaul and a rethink. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I too cannot support this, and like Councillor Joyce, I represent an area of Lynn that's very deprived, and in fact it's in the 10% most deprived areas in the country. And we know that there are people who are getting school meal vouchers, but these are being paid for by the government, and yet they're not enough to feed children. We know there are people with backlogs of repairs that are not being done by private landlords, and our own housing standards department struggle to get these absent landlords and people to do the proper repairs that they should do. The agents are not doing them. People are in great hardship. We know people have lost their jobs during the pandemic. We know that people have been furloughed. We know young people are finding it so hard to get jobs. And I can remember the days when there was 100% council tax support, the time when I advised people in the local CAB. So I can't support this. We need to think again. We need to lobby the government. We need to have social justice, and it needs to start today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I have no more people listed on the chat function, so I'll go back to Councillor Knockholes. Would you like to speak, please?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Which case, oh, hello. Councillor Rives, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure of the best way of doing this, but I would like to propose an amendment instructing the leader to contact the government, the necessary government department, and express our profound dissatisfaction with the way the scheme operates. And it pushes the owners straight down to borough councils, which are already under extreme pressure from funding. But it really is a national responsibility, in my opinion. And I think it's disingenuous that the responsibility is pushed this way. And it's very unfair on the leader to have to say the things he's had to say. So I wonder if anyone might second me on that. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Councillor Lawton.
Okay. Would you like to speak?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Councillor Rives, could you define your amendment, please?
Certainly. I'd like to instruct, I'd like the council to instruct the leader to write to the government department charged with this decision, expressing our profound dissatisfaction that this the onus of this has been pushed downwards to the borough council when it really is a national sort of issue. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Joyce, you'd like to speak on the amendment, would you please?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we'd be prepared to support the amendment if I'm not keen on instructing the leader. I'd much sooner have the support of the leader, to be honest, because I'm fairly confident he's not happy with having to make this hard decision every year. But if Councillor Rives sticks to instruct, I'll go with it, but with a heavy heart. And I would actually like to hear the leader come forward with a response. Is he willing to actually write to the government? Because he can rest assured he has the support of the Labour group in getting rid of this awful system.
Thank you, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Long, you'd like to speak on the amendment, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would urge councillors not to support the amendment. The scheme is, as the government has provided to us. My understanding is there is a root and branch revision to the whole tax benefit and all other systems. What difference do we think we can make asking as one district council to change the system? I think we would be far better in utilising the offices of such as the local government association and seeking support from all district level and unitary councils that raise council tax, and look to suggest at that point or from them where they feel the scheme ought to be different. I would expect in writing to government as individually, it would carry little weight, but potentially writing via the local government association, it may be possible to raise not least the burden that we every year have to consult on a scheme that doesn't change a huge amount. And it may be that via other, the connection with other councils, that LGA council leaders across the country are hearing exactly the same. But individually, our voice is small and potentially our voice could be stronger. Yes, a fully funded scheme would be beneficial. One that you don't have to consult on every year would be beneficial. One that was set in statute and set in place, I feel would be beneficial. That's not talking against the benefit that is currently there. The actual scheme provides help and support to many thousands of people, not just in West Norfolk for our scheme, but on schemes from other councils right across the country. And so on that basis, I wouldn't accept the amendment as worded, but needless to say, would use the offices of the local government association to look to help to improve the way that both this discount is given to people on their council tax, but actually the big question is how local government is funded in its entirety. And so that's all I want to say in terms of the amendment, Mr. Mayor. Maybe the questioner or the bringer of the amendment, the proposer of the amendment, would accept that that will happen and then be happy enough to support the fact that we've got to have a scheme in place, and thereby principles and voting against it. If we all voted against it and didn't have a scheme, nobody would get any help, and that would not be suitable.
Thank you, Councillor Long. I have no more people wishing to speak on the chat function. So, Councillor Rise, would you like to sum up your amendment, please?
Thank you. I accept Councillor Joyce's point that giving instructions to the leader is probably highly inappropriate. But I also, when I listened to Councillor Long, I did detect the sadness in his voice that yet again he has had to come forward as almost the unacceptable face of capitalism and impose this burden upon the least advantaged in our community. Therefore, I would like to continue with this amendment. I think it's an opportunity for our council to provide leadership and for all members of this council to show that they have listened and they identify with the many people in West Norfolk who are on the bedline and for whom a relatively small amount of money is a godsend at this time of year, and indeed whilst we're going through this epidemic. So I personally wish the amendment to stand. I'd like it to be voted on, and I'd appeal to all members to vote with their hearts and see the hardship and deprivation around them and consider that we as a council can actually, on this instance, provide leadership and go directly to the government and express our thoughts and our concerns for the people of our own borough. And I think this is a case for leadership, and I don't think this is a time to hide behind the relevant trade body, for want of a better expression. I think we need to show leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. We'll now move to a vote on the amendment then. Sorry, would you like to speak, seconder?
Yes, I would.
Oh,
just
sorry.
a short thing. I see a lot of unfairness here, denying these people help when they are throwing money away at holiday cottages. They don't register for council tax. They don't register or they don't have to pay business tax because they're not getting enough, yet they're
Mr. Mayor,
taking...
point of order, please, if I may. This is about the amendment, not the general principle of council tax support.
No, I'm just saying the unfairness of it. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor Lawton. We'll now move to the vote. For the amendment, against or abstain. Becky, would you like to take over?
Thank you. Councillor Ayres.
Against.
Banbridge.
Against.
Beale.
For.
Bondi.
For.
Blunt.
Against.
Bury.
For.
Brower.
Against.
Bub.
Against.
Bullen. Councillor Bullen.
For.
Collingham.
Against.
John Collett.
Again, that wasn't on the mic.
For.
Councillor Sandra Collett. For. Crofts.
Against.
Dark.
Against.
Devereux.
Against.
Dickinson.
Against.
Gidney.
Against.
Hipperson.
Against.
Holmes.
For.
Howard. Oh, apologies. Howard. Howland.
Abstain.
Howman.
For.
Hudson. Councillor Hudson.
For.
Humphrey.
Against.
Jones.
For.
Joyce.
For.
Kemp.
For.
Kirk.
Against.
Coons.
Against.
Lawrence.
Against.
Lawton.
For.
Long.
Against.
Lowe.
Against.
Manning.
Against.
Middleton.
Against.
Moriarty.
Against.
Against.
Ask you again.
Sorry, Councillor Moriarty. Was that, what was your vote?
Against.
Sorry.
Okay.
Morley.
Against.
Nash.
Against.
Knockolds.
Against.
Parish.
For.
Patel.
Against.
Ratcliffe.
For.
Rose.
Abstain.
Rest.
For.
Rives.
For.
Sampson.
Against.
Sandal.
Against.
Squire.
Abstain.
Spikings.
Against.
Story.
Against.
A. Tyler.
For.
D. Tyler.
Against.
De Wally.
For.
Whitby.
Against.
Just let me trot those up.
Right. Thank you. The result of the vote, councillors, is 17 for, 31 against, and 3 abstentions. So the amendment is lost. We return to the original motion And I believe we're at the stage, I think Councillor Knockholes, you didn't wish to speak, we're at Councillor Long summing up.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've heard from opposition councillors that they don't support the principle of this particular scheme of supporting people with their council tax who are in need. We hear from them that they wish to have some other system that is not yet identified. If we all reject this under a matter of principle, we won't have a scheme in place, and this has to be agreed by the 31st of this month. I would urge councillors to support the scheme that we have. Take from me the assurance of what I said earlier. It's easy to be hypercritical and say that we can't leave it in my hands. Why can't I be compassionate? Oh yes, I'm sorry, I'm not a socialist. I would urge everyone to support this motion, and I would urge that we do everything we can to support those with the budget that we have available. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Long. We now move to a vote on the original motion. I'll hand you over to Becky again.
Councillor Ayres,
4.
Bambridge,
4.
Beale,
Against.
Bondi,
Abstain.
Blunt,
4.
Bone,
Against.
Bauer,
4.
Bubb,
4.
Bullen,
Yes.
Councillor Bullen. Sorry, was that abstain,
Just
Councillor
abstain.
Bullen? It was it? Collingham,
4.
John Collett,
Against.
Sandra Collett,
Against.
Crofts,
4.
Dark,
4.
Devereux,
4.
Dickinson,
4.
Gidney,
4.
Hipperson,
4.
Holmes,
Abstain.
Howland,
Abstain.
Howman,
Against.
Hudson,
Against.
Humphrey,
4.
Jones,
Against.
Joyce,
Against.
Kemp,
Against.
Kirk,
4.
Coons,
4.
Lawrence,
4.
Lawton,
Abstain.
Long,
4.
Lowe,
4.
Manning,
4.
Middleton,
4.
Moriarty,
4.
Morley,
4.
Nash,
4.
Knockholds,
4.
Parish,
4.
Patel,
4.
Ratcliffe,
4.
Rose,
4.
Rust,
Against.
Rives,
Against.
Sampson,
4.
Sandal,
4.
Squire,
4.
Spikings,
4.
Story,
4.
A. Tyler,
Against.
D. Tyler,
4.
DeWally,
Abstain.
Whitby,
4.
Thank you. Councillors, the result of the vote is 35 for, 12 against and 6 abstentions. Thank you, councillors. The motion is therefore carried. We now move to item 8, Cabinet Members' Reports. We start with Business Development. Councillor Middleton, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'd just like to read out something I've written on the Future High Street Fund. Obviously, it was quite bleak within the report at the time that was written, and we have now some more information. If that would be okay with you and okay with members.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So we are extremely disappointed that we haven't been successful and that the Future High Street Fund wasn't supported by the government. Now, the Town Deal Board and the Council have obviously worked extremely hard on this over a great deal of months. And, we did have extensive consultation. Around about 500 people had their say on future use and ideas for the town through the Vision Kings Lynn channels. Now, Kings Lynn is one of few towns nationally. We're good that we've got into this position, that we have been designated a heritage action zone, a high street heritage action zone, and have the opportunity to secure a town deal. Obviously, we were also shortlisted for the Future High Street Fund. Now, the government has been clear that there were some reprioritisation in how they divvied out the Future High Street Fund, and it was extremely competitive. Some £1.6 billion was actually bid for in the end, and only 800 million has been allocated. As we know, 15 towns were successful in achieving the full amount. Around 50 odd have been given a conventional sort of portion of what they asked for. We don't know the terms around those 57 towns, and we believe them all to be slightly different depending on their asking. Now, unfortunately, Kings Lynn was one of around the 30 that had been unsuccessful on this occasion. But we have secured other funding, and we're confident in our town deal. And let's face it, many towns won't have these other opportunities. For some towns, it was the Future High Street Fund or nothing. And for some towns, they were also unsuccessful with that bid. Now, the Town Deal Board is working well, and members are committed, enthusiastic and well supported. And essentially, they come from a range of different backgrounds and sectors. Now, we're going to use this strong foundation for the basis of developing future funding bids, including the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the Levelling Up Fund, all to be launched within the spring. And we do believe that a new lottery fund, heritage lottery bid will be launched in the next couple of months as well. Now, initial feedback from the government is that the projects submitted were strong and in line with the interventions they were looking for from towns. And the Future High Street Fund process has given us the opportunity to engage with our businesses and our resident community on the future of our town and develop strong projects for Kings Lynn, which will enable us to respond positively and quickly when these other funding opportunities arise. Now, we are committed to continuing the strong engagement we have started, and where appropriate, the board will be establishing advisory groups for different projects so that we can reach out to a wider range of stakeholders and partners, including young people and specialists in different sectors. In this way, we'll be able to continue to develop a constructive and collaborative dialogue, which will reflect in the views of the wider community. I'm sure there's probably some questions, so I'll pause there and beg to move my report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Have we any questions, please, for Councillor Middleton on his report or his additional dialogue? Where we start, we've lost the place again. Councillor Rives, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had the opportunity to study the Future High Street Fund application in some detail now. And one of the things which impressed me about the numbers was the very, very positive, I think it's called benefit cost ratio for the Guildhall project. It's in excess of 20, which I won't go into numbers because I believe they're not public numbers, which really did surprise me that we didn't attract a partial funding response in respect of that as a standalone project. What I'd like to ask the Cabinet Member for Regeneration is what measures are now available to this council to take this very high return project forward, given that it is not a part of the town plan application, and it is clearly of extremely high economic value to Kings Lynn, as identified in the failed Future High Streets Fund application. Thank you.
Councillor Ives. Councillor Middleton.
Thanks for your question. Yeah, you are. Thanks for those words. The Guildhall project was extremely well received from government, and as you say, yes, we did score extremely highly with that particular project in isolation to the rest of the bid. Now, what the government are urging us to do, and I think this is a fantastic announcement, is that the government want us to put all of the bids that we put in the Future High Street Fund into our town fund deal. Now that will bring our town fund ask to around about 46 million from the current 25. Now, we don't expect to get 46 million. We have been told we won't get 46 million. But what it will enable the government to do, well, it's one of two options. Either the government can select from a wider range of projects that they like the look of, and the Guildhall project was one that we got a good feedback on, and they will either select from that project list to bring it in line with the 25 million. If they like more than the 25 million, then it will be put back to the council, and we will obviously have to prioritise which projects we allocate that we'd like to progress further. That answers your question.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Ives?
I do really. I appreciate that this project has had a long history and that there are complex different contractual liabilities linking the stakeholders and all parties together. But it remains a very, very important project. I wonder if it is right for the council to consider this primarily a project of economic regeneration. And I wonder if it is right that now is the time for an absolutely fresh start for negotiations between all the stakeholders, so that the misunderstandings of the past can be put behind us once and for all, and we can all concentrate on achieving something which is clearly of great economic or great potential economic benefit to this town.
Thank you, Councillor Ives. Councillor Middleton, would you like to come back again, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, what we know so far is that what we've currently got down in the bid for the Guildhall was well received and is strong. However, I think we do recognise that, going into any of these bids, it's good to have wide range support. So tomorrow we have our next town board meeting, and I have put forward a recommendation to that town board that an advisory group is set up specifically around the Guildhall. We will also be having another advisory group based on public realm. Essentially, what we want to do with both of these groups is to have a setup of individuals, not just from the council or public bodies, but businesses, young people, and specialists in those project groups, to enable them to help the town board and then the council develop what we've currently got further. So we've got a really good, strong foundation at the moment. But I think that with that kind of support and input from these other stakeholders, it will enable us to be even stronger in the bid when the other funds become available. And what I'd like to see is that those advisory groups, that becomes the working group, if you like, who will engage with a wider range of stakeholders, especially around the Guildhall and the users, etc. We haven't got down exactly who's going to be on that board yet. That's all going to be up, to put to the town board tomorrow. And we will obviously seek out the right specialists and people to form that group.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Councillor Moriarty, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question comes from your extra comments, Councillor Middleton. Correct me if I'm wrong, inform me, us all, please. I'm trying to understand the position of the town board. Am I right in thinking it was a prerequisite of our application for the Future High Street Fund? And if I'm wrong, I may be wrong, is it a prerequisite for the town fund deal? I've got no issues with embracing stakeholders. I'm just trying to understand whether we're taking the town board, which has not necessarily been associated with a successful application, forward when that might not be the right format?
Yes, thanks very much. The town fund, the town board specifically was part of the criteria for the town fund, and therefore it was set up for that. Ideally, they were there to help form the vision of the town fund and the town investment plan. Over the course of the last year, obviously the Future High Street Fund was obviously in process as well. So to get that extra input from wider stakeholders, on a couple of occasions, the different ideas were took to the town board to have comment on and to help us shape that as part of that consultation. Now, following the town investment plan being produced and the way that the board has engaged over the course of the last year, you know, there's a great number of people on there. We as a council want to try and keep that board together, because I think that will be a really strong in terms of the consultations that the council will get involved in to get wider input into future funding. So obviously they're not a decision making, you know, it's not a case of what they say the council does, but it forms part of that, helping us build that wider vision of what businesses and other stakeholders want to see happen in the town.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Moriarty?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Righto. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your report, Councillor Middleton. I'd just like to ask, while I understand that this is how we have to apply for this funding and the amount of time and effort that has gone into it, do we have the costs that we have amounted, you know, or accrued whilst applying for this bid? And do we have a success percentage in our bidding for these types of funds? Thank you.
Good question. I haven't got any of those to hand, but I think I can get them, and I'll be sure to send them over and to councillors, especially in terms of the Future High Street Fund and the resource element to this. But I think what's important that with that cost is not all is lost at this stage. So the projects that we've built up for the Future High Street Fund, okay, yes, we haven't been successful in this round of funding, but the government has urged us to put these forward for 3 other funding pots, plus the potentially a heritage lottery fund when that opens as well. So what we've currently built isn't lost, although obviously through this fund it is in some ways. But councils need to have these projects nicely formed and ready to go for these funding opportunities when they do come forward. And obviously if the funding opportunities aren't there, then the council has its own decisions to make in terms of how to provide capital for these types of things. So I'll discuss that specific question with officers, and we'll try and get something over to you.
Thank you.
Have you a supplementary, Councillor Jones?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Morley, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Middleton, you did say that you wish to keep the town board together. And I wonder whether or not you would like to reconsider that and think of the opportunity to widen the board, and not necessarily with more people, but widen its expertise, both in terms of people who have positions within Kings Lynn itself, or residents there, people who are experts in certain fields, and maybe not so many paid officers or paid Crown members or paid officers, but more people who are in industry and actually work within Kings Lynn and the area itself. It just seemed to me that you're giving the board just further opportunities to, I won't say to fail, because I hope they don't, but to need to be freshened up and not stale. Thank you.
Well, I don't think there's any staleness about it. I think we're incredibly lucky to have on the board exactly what you mentioned, a wide range of people with different interests and inputs in Kings Lynn, business men and women, specialists in different sectors, both from the private and the public sector. One of the real strengths of our board and why we want to keep it going is that all these people have put their time in voluntary. They've developed a good town investment plan and town fund bid. And I think, yes, closely monitor if this, if over time you do sometimes get these sort of voluntary boards that, you know, in 6 months' time it might dissolve away, and people might say, well, we've done my bit, I'm not going to be interested in it anymore. In terms of specific skills and expertise, this is exactly why we want to bring in the advisory groups, because there might be somebody who's got a lot of knowledge surrounding, let's say, the Guildhall project as an example. Well, let's bring them in to give them something specific to do, rather than trying to get them involved in the wider remit of the board. So we are opening it up in that way, but we have got a really strong board, and there is a wide range of people already on it. So I don't feel the need to try and rustle that at this stage.
Was that something? Councillor Rust.
Thank you. Very briefly, please. You talk about consultation with people who are relevant to the town, but there's a failure to consult with the members of CLAC, the Kings Lynn Area Consultative Committee, and I would ask that this is reversed, and members that represent the town and those people within it are included in the town board, please.
Kings Lynn Area Consultative Committee can ask at any point to put these things on their agenda, and I believe they do. I think, you know, it pretty much mirrors Councillor Morley's comments with making these types of boards heavy in terms of public sector representatives. We've got a good solid board already, and as councillors we need to form where we fall within this process, which is the committees that we have on the council, your regeneration and development. I'd be quite happy to come to CLAC and make sure that CLAC are fully consulted and have their input. Feel free to put me on your agenda and the officers and invite me, and we'll ensure that you form part of the process going forward.
Your supplementary, Councillor Rust.
I'm sure that the chair and I as vice chair will make sure that Councillor Middleton is invited. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Right. Councillor Bullen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sitting in Down Market Valley, got three
I can't hear.
No. Hang on, Councillor Bullen. We've got a technical problem here. We can't hear you. I don't know whether we can do anything and let him start again, or should we go to the next speaker and go back to?
Stick the question in the chat if needs be.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much better. Go ahead.
I beg your pardon. Sorry, I've got a problem with my speaker. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sitting here in Downham Market and representing Downham Market, I once again get very frustrated that the debate, focus and discussion is on Kings Lynn. I'd like to think that the council in future might put some effort into funding, looking to support the rest of the borough and Downham Market. And I wonder if there are any plans for that, Mr. Middleton, Councillor Middleton. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, this is something that's been posed to me over the course of the last year, especially with, you know, every time we talk about the town fund, every time we talk about the future High Street fund. In terms of my report and the questions I'm answering today with the future High Street fund, it was Kings Lynn that was allocated as part of this fund, Kings Lynn that was allocated as part of the town fund. I don't think we should, you know, I don't think we should speak against that to the government and say, no, thanks, we don't want it in Kings Lynn. That's what was put in this. But obviously, you know, we will seek, if funding opportunities become available and various projects that could be enacted, not only in Downham Market, but then also in Hunstanton as well. Hopefully that answers your question. Failing that, I'll be happy to have a discussion with you, meet up with you at the right time, and we can explore that.
Your supplementary. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Bullen?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Now move on to Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have to say that, you know, you're saying that there's a strong foundation of consultation, but surely the reason why the government turned down the Future High Street Fund bid was because there was not good consultation. You only spoke to 500 people out of, what, 40,000 people in Lynn. People of South Lynn were not consulted about the issue of running a road through the little park by the South Gate, a memorial park to the Queen's grandfather. The issue of the library, our lovely Carnegie Library, being moved to an old car park structure. These were not good projects. If there had been good consultation, we would have come up with strong ones. What are you going to do to make sure that we have a good set of strong projects which show a vision to the town? How are you going to do that, Councillor Middleton, please?
Well, I do believe that most of what you said is inaccurate and mostly forms your opinion, I suppose. But we consulted through Vision Kings Lynn. We did have 500 responses throughout that. We also considered things like, you know, and Councillor Russ pulled me up on this, our shared vision of what we want the future of the High Street to be with regards to destination and community space. Now, the feedback that we had was that the projects were strong, but in terms of how the future High Street Fund specifically was allocated, we didn't show enough economic return, and actually we put too much emphasis on community and skills and not enough hard cash return, which I think is a bit strange. Luckily, when it comes to the town fund, how that is allocated is actually quite different. Towns Fund is very much about asking local towns and councils, what do you want to see? The Future High Street Fund wasn't necessarily what do we want to see, it was about getting maximum buck return from them. So, you know, these projects will go forward, hopefully, into the Towns Fund, and throughout the other measures that I've said today, you know, feel free to form part of that consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Have your supplementary, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have. Can we see bolder projects, for example, like a railway extension and a rail park and ride from the Saddlebow area, going into town, perhaps a steam train, something to put Lynn on the map again, something to keep cars out of the centre, which our transport plan isn't doing. Let's be bold. Let's go back to the drawing board. Can I meet with Councillor Middleton virtually to speak about this more? Because I'm really concerned about the lack of vision in the Future High Streets Fund plan, apart from, of course, the Guildhall. What can we do, please?
Well, I think I've answered most of that already. A park and ride and a steam train, you know, we are, I'm not quite sure the money that we've got available to us will stretch that far, and I'm not sure a steam train would meet the climate sort of environmental sort of side of what the council's trying to achieve. Feel free to give me a call, Alex. I'll be happy to listen to you for a little while and understand what you think we should be doing. But I don't personally think that those suggestions are the right ones. Although, you know, all suggestions are good suggestions in some ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Middleton. Councillor Parish.
Thank you. Councillor Middleton, do you agree that you've had sufficient questions?
I believe so, but that's my answer to that one.
Thank you.
Supplementary, Councillor Parish?
You got your mic off.
Can we move on, please?
Yes.
Yes, we've got no more questions. We now move to the Climate Change Commercial Services. Councillor Coons, please. Would you like to present your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would like to move my report.
Questions for Councillor Coons, please. Can you see any? No. There are no questions for Councillor Coons. So we move on to Councillor Blunt for development.
Councillor Worley would like to speak, struggling with the chat. Mr. Mayor, may I have questions for Councillor Coons, please?
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please can Councillor Coons kindly provide an update on the progress of the formation of the Biodiversity Cabinet Working Group and whether or not part of its function will be planning for tree planting in Kings Lynn and the wider borough?
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, obviously I'm not part of the working group. I understand that an offer has been made that the working group can assembled, but without officer backing. And I understood that that was going ahead. As for tree planting, yes, that will be part of the discussions. As I said in my report, there is a major tree planting project being formulated at the moment. I hope to be able to announce that by the next council meeting, but at the moment it's out to tender for a contractor to plant these trees and look after them for 3 or 4 years after that.
Have you a supplementary, Councillor Dorley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. Sorry, I'm a little bit confused. I am correct in saying that there is a distinction between, hopefully I said, the Biodiversity Cabinet Working Group and the Climate Change Working Groups. If that's the case, in the current absence of officer support, can you give your assurances that there will be a free and fair exchange of information between these two groups, as well as the relevant portfolio holders, to ensure that we can complement each other's activities? Thank you.
Yes, I mean the work to set up a project plan and a plan to move ahead with environmental issues, that work is going on. And yes, that will be published very shortly, and that will obviously be available to everyone, including the working group. And that does cover biodiversity and, well, carbon reduction, tree planting, everything you can think of that's pertinent to climate change and air quality improvement and this sort of thing. But that is going on, yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any more questions? I can see no more questions for Councillor Coons. So we move on to development. Councillor Blunt, would you like to present your report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'd like to make an addition to my report. Earlier this week, the housing delivery test results for 2019-2020, i.e. from April 2019 to March 2020, were released. I am pleased to announce our number was 94%. Sadly, the pass mark was 95%. This means that we will have yet again to have produced another action plan, but we do not need to include the 20% buffer into our 5-year land supply calculation, which will mean we'll go from 6.97 years to 7.97 years of worth of supply. I beg to move my report.
Thank you, Councillor. Have you any questions, please? Can't see any. Right, we'll move on. Environmental Services and Public Protection, Councillor Dark, please.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, councillors. Before moving my report, I've actually mentioned in the report that I was going to give an update on the latest figures from our hard-working Revs and Benefits team in getting government grants out to people. To give people the headlines on this, from the 22nd of the 11th, 20 to the 21st today, 2 months, the team have paid out £2,443,719. That's under 7 different grant schemes. So rather than trying to confuse people around those figures, what I intend to do on my regular update to parish councillors and councillors tomorrow, I'll circulate the chart which shows the breakdown of those. I had mentioned in my report to councillors that there had been a software glitch around the latest payments and a patch needed to be put in. That's been done, and the reassuring figures this week are that £573,000 of grants have been paid out this week. So the scheme is working and the staff are working very well in there. But I now move my report and I'm quite happy to take questions.
Thanks to Councillor Dark. Have we any questions, please, for Councillor Dark? No? Can you see any?
No.
No? We cannot see any. We'll now move on to Councillor Lawrence. Housing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, if I may, just before I propose my report,
At the time of writing my report, I mentioned that evictions were going to commence on the 11th of January. I can now tell you that this has now been halted and extended until the 21st of February this year. That is my only addition. So, Mr. Mayor, may I beg to move my report?
Thank you, Councillor. Have you any questions, please?
Councillor Rust.
Can't see it. Where is it?
It's on the bottom of the previous ones.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Councillor Rust, please.
Thank you. I did submit questions in advance because I wanted to avoid wasting precious time, our meeting, but I've yet to receive a response. Councillor Lawrence, I'm happy to receive a response via email, but I would like to make public my question, please. In your report, you state that the welfare cabins, winter night shelter and local hotels B&B were used as temporary accommodation to ensure that no one was rough sleeping. But there were rough sleepers and there still are. I know this because, as you know, I've been volunteering overnight at the night shelter, and they're still arriving to ask for help. So can you provide information on the communication between agencies, some of which are saying everyone is accommodated and others which know that they're not? This is a similar question to one that I asked you probably about a year ago. So perhaps you could refer to the answer you gave me then. I do have a second question, which is related to empty properties as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The information we use, we receive information from various agencies informing us that there may be somebody who's homeless, there may be somebody living rough, and we put people out to find these people, and we try and engage with these people. And to our knowledge, we are doing our very best, because we are also under government guidance, to get everybody in and to get everybody with a roof over their heads, whether it be a hostel, a shelter, or whatever it is. So as far as we are aware, through our network of agencies, we do our best to get everybody in and everybody is sorted out. Now, there is the odd occasion when you do get one or two people who point blankly refuse to work with us, and there is nothing that we can do about this. We do try and find them, and we do desperately try and engage with them, but we cannot force people in if they basically run away from us. So the information what we receive from all our partners is nobody is rough sleeping. Now, if you have some information about that, either tell me, or even better, tell our officers so they can try and engage. But as far as we're concerned, everybody is in. And on another note, I really appreciate every volunteer, and I think every volunteer should have a tap on the back. Congratulations, and I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. But what I would say is, in the environment that we're in at the moment, please be careful, because the guidance is we shouldn't be doing volunteers, because a lot of these or all these things have a business plan and should be able to take care of themselves. The last thing I want to hear is any volunteer's family, including yourself, bring COVID into their household and cause big problems. So please be very, very careful.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Rust, have you a supplementary to that question, or would you like to move on to your separate question, please?
A supplementary to the question, I do wish to point out that volunteers are exempt, and the guidance states that. However, my question was, could you please provide information on the communication between the agencies? I do indeed report those who I see rough sleeping, but I've asked for communication on the agencies. You don't have to give that now, but I would like it if possible, please. I'm happy to go straight on to my second question, if that's okay. Thank you. And thank you for your response, Councillor Lawrence. The other matter was related to the long-term empty properties. As you might know, I have one in my ward, and it's been an issue now for about 20 years. I see it each time I walk my ward, and I've recently had an email from a direct neighbour stating that there are now rats coming from that house into her property, impacting on the health and safety of both her and her child. I do want to make it clear the council officers are helping, and I do communicate with them about these issues. We know that the number of long-term empty properties could go a huge way towards the council's housing delivery targets without the need to create greenhouse gases that often go with building new houses, the negative impact of building on open spaces in an urban environment, and the factor of creating distress and upset to the established communities. What exactly has the council done to move forward on bringing these long-term empty properties into the council housing stock? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rust. Councillor Lawrence.
Yep, thank you for your question. I totally agree with you about long-term empty homes, 100%. And if the council's environmental health is on board with this one, it could be a step closer to try and getting something done about this particular property. The problem is, if somebody wants to own another property and not live in it and leave it empty, we are absolutely powerless to do anything about it. We charge the council tax at very high rates, and we try and engage. We have tried to engage, and we try and do everything we can. But unfortunately, there is very little we can do. There's no law against leaving a property empty, providing it is no danger to public health or safety. Then things can be done. In the past, we have managed to get one or two schemes whereby there was some money put up, either from central government or wherever, and we managed to get a few places back online, and we had dealings with our partners, our social housing partners, who would offer contracts for either 5 or 10 year basis and use them as rentable properties. And after that amount of time, they could be charged back to the owner, and the rents were adjusted accordingly to have any pay for any works what were done to the property. At the moment, there is nothing happening with this, whether it's because of pandemic, I don't know, but there's bigger fish to fry. But we are always on the lookout for this, and only a few days ago, I was talking to officers to see if there was anything else we could possibly do. Because yes, I totally agree. For every empty property we could get back online, it would be a home for a family, which has got to be a fantastic thing.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Rust, have you a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Right. It's now nearly 5 to 6. I'd like to propose a 10-minute comfort break, and we will return in 10 minutes' time and carry on with Councillor Gidney's report. Thank you, councillors. We okay? Welcome back, councillors. You're all back. Good. We now move on to project delivery. Councillor Peter Gidney, please. Would you like to present your report?
Chair.
Hello.
Just before that, do we want to do a roll call?
Oh, we've got to do a roll call. Sorry, Peter. Whoa. We need to do a roll call again.
Okay. Councillor Ayres.
Present.
Bambridge.
Present.
Beale.
Present.
Bondi.
Present.
Blunt.
Present.
Bone.
Present.
Bauer.
Present.
Bubb.
Present.
Bullen.
Present.
Bullingham.
Present. The host has stopped my video. I can't turn it on.
Right, we'll look into that.
Thank you.
John Collett.
What was that? Didn't hear it.
Oh, come on.
John Collett.
Present.
Sandra Collett.
Present, and the same with our video. We can't put ours on either.
Okay. Crofts.
Present.
Dark.
Present.
Devereux.
Present, but my video's down.
Dickinson.
Present.
Gidney.
Present. A video problem as well.
Gibson.
Present.
Holmes.
Present.
Howland.
Present. My video's off as well.
Howman.
Hello, yes, my video's off as well.
Hudson. Councillor Hudson.
He left a while ago.
She left early.
Humphrey.
Present.
Jones.
Present.
Joyce.
Present.
Kemp.
Present.
Kirk.
Present.
Coombs. Councillor Coombs. Okay, I'll come back. Councillor Lawrence.
Present.
Lawton.
Present.
Long.
Present.
Lowe.
Present.
Manning.
Present.
Middleton.
Present.
He's got.
Moriarty.
Present.
Hawley.
Present.
Nash.
Present.
Knockolds.
Present.
Parish.
Present.
Patel. Councillor Patel.
It's back.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Present.
Rose.
Present.
Rust.
Thing behind them.
Present.
Rives. Councillor Rives.
Sorry, present.
Sampson.
Present.
Sandal.
Present.
Vikings.
Present.
Squire.
Here.
Story.
Present.
A. Tyler.
Present. Present.
D. Tyler.
Present.
DeWally.
Present.
Whitby.
Present.
Could I just check if Councillor Coombs and Patel are in the meeting?
Yes, I'm here now. Thank you.
Councillor Patel.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I can hear you now. It's echoing a lot. Sorry, when I turn the video on, sorry. I can't even hear the debate. Well, I can hear it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gidney, would you like to present your report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I beg to move my report. Thank you.
Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councillor Gidney, for your report. And I noticed that you attended a meeting of stakeholders in December regarding the Heritage Action Zone Chapel Street project. Now, I wonder why you didn't consult the CLAC, the Kings Lynn Area Committee that represent Kings Lynn in place of a parish council, because there's so many projects. We know that the Borough Council's got 7,000 new homes in and around Kings Lynn in the next few years. And they're issues that are so important, like green space, places to walk. And for example, you didn't consult properly on Hardings Way, you didn't consult the people of South Lynn, and you held the meetings in the centre of the town, in Salisbury College. This is so important. So can you tell us when you're going to consult the CLAC, please, about this particular project? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Thank you for that. I'm keen that this particular project has as much public involvement as possible. So before the next meeting, which isn't too far away, I will contact you and try and engage other stakeholders. Thank you.
Have you a supplementary, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, thank you. And I'd like to ask the Cabinet member, when he looks at his projects, particularly for Kings Lynn Town Centre, and you're thinking of building, how are you thinking of putting in the green space, which is so fundamentally important to people's health, particularly during COVID, during lockdown? People need places to walk, and the risk of transmission is vastly reduced outdoors. Conversely, there's a high risk where people are crowded together. So green space needs to be part of your projects going forward. And I'd like to see something in there about that, please. Thank you.
I think we'll treat that as a separate question, or second question. Councillor Gidney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Green spaces in towns are very, very important. And consequently, that's an area which we need to examine in all projects.
Thank you, Councillor Gidney. Have you a supplementary to your second question, Councillor Kemp?
Well, yes, and I would like to ask if the Cabinet member agrees that we need more play equipment in areas of the town for children. We need to make sure that they're accessible, they're updated, because parishes are able to put forward great, new schemes, and rightly so, but we need to make sure we're doing all we can in the town centre, because this is where the most deprived children live, isn't it?
Well, if you could contact me, send me an email of your thoughts, and then we can see how we can consider this and take perhaps these ideas further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Beale, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Councillor Gidney. As you know, there was an article in the paper on the 14th of this month regarding the Hunstanton South Road car park. There was you were going to put an appeal in, and you quite correctly emailed me and said this is a second application, not an appeal, and to the planning department. This is will go through the normal planning process, which of course has essential facility for people to comment. Changes have been made to that proposal, you told me, and as I have no knowledge of this at all. No one has consulted me as a representative of Hunstanton, and I believe nobody has contacted Carol Bauer either. But I understand there's been communication with Hunstanton Town Council, who was fervently against the first application, and I also understand the solutions presented were found to be acceptable, which I found so strange. Can you, as the portfolio holder, assure the people of Hunstanton that another public consultation will take place on this matter, as they were fervently against it in the first application? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beale. Now, when the application is submitted, there is the opportunity, of course, for everybody to comment on it. As the application was turned down at the planning committee, the applicant, the borough, and its officers in this case have addressed the issues that were raised, and these were specifically to do with car parking. So what they've done, they've looked at the car park spaces between Southgate East and the coach park, And by rearranging the spaces in a more logical way, they've actually achieved 50 more spaces. In addition, there are 34 more spaces available again in the coach park for peak times and for peak events. So this makes a total of 84 additional car parking spaces. There are a further 7 spaces made available within the site for residents. So with regards to the second part, the resident set means that there's an average of 1.2 spaces per flat, which is higher than 2 other local applications which have been passed. So if I may, I'll email you after the meeting and discuss it further, but that's the information I have at the moment. But it seems that this has satisfied the town council members that were consulted. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gidney. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Beale?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. If I could just say again, is there going to be a public consultation? Thank you.
Well, the application, when it goes in, I mean, it does consult the public, doesn't it? By means of, you know, there's on part of the application involves public consultation. In this case, the design has been found acceptable. All bits of the application have been found acceptable. What was the sticking point was the car park spaces. These seem to have been resolved now. So what's to discuss? I mean, they either are or aren't, if you take my meaning, because everything else is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gidney. Councillor Andy Tyler, please. Councillor Andy Tyler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Myself, as chair of, can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, we can now see you as well.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. I wanted to ask the portfolio holder. Myself and my vice chair are always happy to and wish to have local matters that concern local councillors for the town. Is he though aware that we are not going to be, the CLAC is not going to be meeting until late March? So a simple question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Andy.
Sorry, I'm not sure of the point of that. I missed the point there, but thank you for the information. We'll have to contact you by email as a group. Thank you.
Have you a supplementary, Councillor Andy?
Yes, yes. It didn't answer the very simple question. Is the portfolio holder aware that the CLAC will not meet virtually until late March? A very simple question.
No, I'm not aware.
As that was the same question, Andy, I'm going to indulge you and you can have a supplementary if you wish.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
Many thanks for your indulgence. Thank you.
Have you any more questions on there?
No.
No. There are no more questions for Councillor Gidney. So I'll move on to Deputy Leader, Councillor Knockholes. Would you like to present your report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I beg to move my report.
Thank you. I'm looking for questions. Can you see any? Oh, yes. Councillor Beale, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of order, really. I want to talk about the TIC, and the public question from Yvonne Bridger was answered by the leader instead of the portfolio holder for tourism. Are you quite happy for me to carry on with my question, which will relate to some of that letter, or would you like me to wait till the leader?
I don't mind. Who wishes to answer the question? Would the leader like to answer it, or Councillor Lockholes?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer it. The reason the leader replied to that public question this evening, because it was about councillors making the decision or reviewing the views from the Civic Society.
Okay, you go ahead then, Councillor Lockholes.
Or Councillor Beale.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Beale, you haven't asked the question yet. You're sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
That's fine. Right, dear Councillor Knockholes, with regard to the Hunstanton TIC and listening to Councillor Long's reply to Yvonne Bridges' question, I'm convinced this borough has no interest or support for the tourist industry in Hunstanton. We are told the TIC was closed because of COVID. Well, surprise, surprise, we all had to close. But surprise, surprise, we had to reopen. It's clear to me and to 2,233 petition signatories by the response not even to have a mention in your report today and not even to speak to me as a democratically member of this council representing Hunstanton, that you have no interest in Hunstanton's tourism trade. And I call upon you to look at that job that you have, and please, could somebody give it to somebody who cares and wants to speak to Hunstanton. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you for that question, Councillor Beale. I'm not sure where you get your information from. We have not made any decisions, and I am totally approve the amount of money we spend on tourism in West Norfolk. Why would we have employed another apprentice person in our tourism department and made our tourism officer a manager if we were not proposing to encourage tourism into our borough? Also, we're helping financing Visit Norfolk, Visit East of England, and we're working with Norfolk and Suffolk as a big partnership and with the new Anglia Let to form a tourism zone in partnership with the government. If we didn't want tourism in our area, we would not be working many hours with the groups I've just mentioned. And I have promised, and you obviously don't trust my promise, that I promised I would review the tourism information where we would place it by Easter, and obviously taking into consideration our COVID restrictions.
Thank you, Councillor Lockholes. Have you a supplementary, please, Councillor Beale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Knockholes, I do hear you and I do understand, and I believe your concentration for tourism is in Kings Lynn, not Hunstanton. One of your leaders, one of the past leaders, said Hunstanton was a jewel in the crown. Not everybody believes this, and it even wasn't him that said that. It was his father before him. But it's not a jewel in the crown anymore. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've finished.
I would like to point, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Sorry to butt in, but I've been to Hunstanton ever since I was a baby. I know the importance of Hunstanton. Otherwise, we would not keep Hunstanton at top quality, employ many gardeners in the gardens, and make it easy for people to come along to Hunstanton. So I'm not quite sure where Councillor Beale gets his information from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Tyler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're all, I know the portfolio holder is, certainly, we're all proud of the live entertainment and culture, plays, shows, musicals, etc. that we enjoy in West Norfolk. With the portfolio holder's knowledge, can she reassure us or not that when restrictions are loosened, that we haven't lost too many of the organisations that provide us with such excellent quality entertainment and culture? As obviously this sounds from government sources that the lockdown is going to continue for some while yet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. Councillor Lockholes.
Thank you. As Councillor Tyler mentioned, I totally agree with him. I am very supportive in our cultural programmes in West Norfolk. It is so important for tourism as well as for our residents. For our mental health, it's very important to be able to attend the cinema or the theatres or outdoor festivals. And of course, we will support our festivals and Graham Middleton, I know, will support events in the town centre. It's so important.
Thank you, Councillor Knockolds. Was that a supplementary, Andy? Was it? I can't remember. Have you a supplementary?
Yes. Is the portfolio holder, from what she understands currently, fairly positive that things will continue on a good footing after the pandemic comes to an end?
Mr. Mayor, I just wished I knew when the pandemic will come to an end. As our leader said earlier this evening, the vaccinations, everybody should receive one, but that may not be until the autumn. So we will do our utmost to have cultural programmes in West Norfolk, but we do have to work within COVID restrictions.
Thank you, Councillor Knockolds. Have we any more questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no more questions for Councillor Knockolds, so we'll move on to the leader. Councillor Long, would you like to present your report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Indeed, I do. And in moving my report, I did mention within the section there pertaining to the council's financial position that I would give an update with your permission and indulgence. I would like to do that now, please.
Okay.
As of councillors will recall that a revised budget for 2020 to 2021 was presented to Cabinet back in September 2020, and that was then approved by Council in December 2020. So the revisions to our budgetary position is obviously from that date forward, and the most recent figures that I have available to me and that are subject to the next budget monitoring report. I was hoping that this report would be available to all councillors before this meeting. I'm now led to believe it will be with you very early part of next week. To summarise the draft that I have before me, and obviously this is not the completed document, but purely a draft of where we're at to now, our estimated drawdown as a result of extra expenditure was in the region of £4.2 million. At this budgetary revision point that we're now looking at, which I think takes us through to the 31st of October, so obviously from September to the 31st of October, sees a revised budget requirement, general reserve of, will need to fund the budget by 3,641,000. So obviously down from the 4.2 million that was originally envisaged. Within that, obviously there were originally within the budget target savings of a turnover savings of £510,000, and that at the end of October, that is in the region of £380,000. So we're a fair way towards making those turnover savings. But obviously the budgetary position is a very volatile beast, and I'm encouraged by the fact that not only is this amended budget monitoring report going to be presented to all councillors very, very soon, but also the detail within it allows us to provide a baseline for our future budget setting and provision for next year. Within the sort of flow of money that has come in, just to give councillors an idea of the extra money that has been paid out and loss of income through our operations, for example, the total for that, the total loss of income in terms of our operations is some £3.4 million. We have received COVID emergency funding from government that totals £2.7 million. We have also received from government sales fees and charges funding, which, if you recall, is the first 5% of those are discounted and we get reimbursed 75%. And that so far claims are 1.2, nearly 1.3 million pounds, a total of almost £4 million of extra government support that we have received. In addition to that, within service areas, there are obviously some savings that were due to be taken through the budgetary process, that because staff being utilised in other spheres of operation and helping with the pandemic response, we are obviously not going to achieve some of those planned savings, and again they will be earmarked fully within that budget monitoring report. I think, obviously, given that we've got, I could read figures to you all night, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important that once councillors receive that budget monitoring, if they have any questions, obviously they can be raised then directly through the members' inquiries email, or if I can answer them directly, if they come to myself, I will obviously help where I can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Questions for Councillor Long, please. Councillor Rives, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst it's true that the council is awaiting detailed feedback from the government on the failure of the Future High Streets Funds bid, would the leader care to comment on the desirability of making full use of the many talents and contacts that exist in West Norfolk and are highly supportive of the regeneration Kings Lynn and, of course, the borough?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I believe that within the town's fund board, we have got a mixture of those exact people who have volunteered themselves to want to help with the betterment of the town. I'm bitterly disappointed at the announcement of the Future High Streets bid funding, and early indications from discussions that are ongoing pertaining to that would indicate to me that the actual subject matter within the bids wasn't what was at fault, as per what we heard from some of those people earlier when they were asking questions of Councillor Middleton. But it was cost-benefit ratio and the overall financial return that the schemes would show. And whilst they did compliment us on the amount of benefit the schemes would bring in terms of amenity to the public of West Norfolk, it has to stack up, as Councillor Middleton has said. But I do believe that within the town's fund board, we do have exactly those people. And of course, the other aspect of this, of course, is for all councillors to be involved in these processes. There are panels that regularly discuss, such as the Future High Streets Fund and Town Fund bid, heritage action zones, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Rives?
I do. I personally think that one of the reasons for the failure of the High Street Fund bid was the failure to engage with large numbers of people, not just in Kings Lynn, but across the entire borough. So I really want to make it sure that we never, ever again repeat this sort of failure, that we always make sure we do engage with all the resources which we have, because it's the people in the borough and the contacts they have and the knowledge they have which make the borough a great place. And it's precisely those people who should be absolutely central of coming up with proposals such as these ones. And, I appreciate that on the town fund, we have, as required by the government, gone through a town board. But again, I'm not obvious to me that there'll be many invitations to people.
Mr. Mayor, this is a question and answer session, not Councillor Rives' view of the world.
I agree with that. Councillor Rives, could you move to a question, please?
Okay. I do apologise.
Supplementary to
for boring
the
everyone.
first, I would suggest, Mr. Mayor.
That's a good idea. I'm sorry for boring everyone with my views as well. I'd just like a commitment from Councillor Long that all future bids will necessarily have the organised engagement with large numbers of relevantly skilled people in King's Lynn and in the borough. I just didn't see that happen.
No, but what I would assure council of is that should the requirement be to do that, then it will be done. If the requirement wasn't to do that or had a different criteria, we would be remiss not to submit a bid that met the criteria of what we were being asked to do. And I think Councillor Ives is asking a question on the pretense that he doesn't actually know why the bid was failed, but his supposition is that there was something inherently either technically wrong with it or not aspirational enough. And I've heard him on the radio talking about casinos. Yes, it was a £25 million fund, and he would want 100 million in match funds so that people could come to Kingston and gamble. There is laid down criteria of what is needed when these bids are put in. Some are successful and some are not successful. It's bitterly disappointing that this wasn't successful. I don't for 1 minute believe it was down to the quality of the items that were included within the bid or the aspiration that they would have brought to the town. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I just comment on this? Could I just add one comment? I'm very disappointed with Councillor Long's apparent lack of economic understanding.
Councillor Rives, I don't think this is the place. This is the question and answer session. Councillor Squire, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Evening all. The Telegraph reported today that the Prime Minister has said that elections will definitely go ahead in May. With this council having suspended non-essential meetings to enable staff to be redeployed to COVID response, has this council made a submission to the government regarding the difficulties organising an election, campaigning during a lockdown and holding account at this time?
Thanks, Councillor Squire.
Thank you, Councillor Squire, for your question. I absolutely, that process has already started. Our returning officer for the borough has made submissions already to James Wild MP and Elizabeth Truss MP, highlighting their serious concerns regarding holding an election in May, obviously for County Police and Crime Commissioner and any parish or town council elections that need to be held. Within that, he raises concerns pertaining to the staffing of polling stations and obviously the vulnerability of somebody who has to sit in a polling station all day while every single person in a given location or village comes by to vote. And the mechanics of obviously requiring in excess of 300 people to act as presiding officers and poll clerks on the election day, and whether they would be able to be forthcoming if for any reason the numbers within the pandemic still remain as they are, because obviously some will be isolating, shielding, may even be infected and unable to attend. Getting people involved at short notice to make up those numbers is nigh impossible. And so those points have been made. We've obviously also had, he's also raised consideration that the availability of some of our regular polling stations are currently closed and that a considerable amount of work would need to be done to them to make them COVID secure. Currently, council staff, when there are elections, many staff that perform other functions get involved in election duties, and many of them are currently redeployed, helping with the response to the pandemic. And obviously at the time of elections, we require more staff physically to be in the office than under a normal scenario. So that response has already been made. But in addition to that, the local government information unit sent me an online survey, and obviously the local government information unit is a lobbying body in terms of local government and its views. And they sent me a survey to complete on behalf of this council. And I utilised the input from our officers in my response to that survey. And that was made electronically as recently as the 18th of January this month. Well, obviously this month.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Have you a supplementary, Councillor Scott?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right,
and
lovely.
thank you, Brian.
Councillor Andy Tyler, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Straightforward question for the leader. Was he disappointed or not with the 500 people that gave guidance during the consultation to do with the High Street Fund, or was it roughly what he expected, or out of the 40,000 odd population, was he bitterly disappointed with those figures? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler.
Thank you,
Councillor
Andy.
Long.
It's always difficult to judge whether or not any consultation response is a good one or a bad one. 500 people responding out of the entire population of Kings Lynn is a far higher response than we had to the consultation on the subject of which we determined earlier on this evening, which was our council tax support scheme, which is a consultation that's open to everyone within the borough to respond to, and we received 6 responses. So on that basis, 500 is far better than we had in terms of response for something which is very important. And on that basis, I would take that 500 responses was a good response in terms of the yardstick set by the other consultation.
Have you a supplementary, Councillor Tyler?
No, well, just a question. Is the council given any guidance? I don't suppose it is, but any guidance as to the sort of response that they would expect from the applicant, or is that completely left in the hands of the local authority applying?
Sorry, Councillor Tyler, you'll have to confirm to me what you're asking. The applicant, in what regard, please?
Councillor Tyler, would you like to rephrase it or try and make it
Yeah,
clearer?
that's fine. When well, is any indication given as to the level of consultees that would be very helpful in order to have a successful bid, or not?
No, if this is pertaining to the bid for the no, there wasn't any indication of what would be an acceptable level of response from the public or other stakeholders in terms of our submission. Suffice to say, it was there was elements within it that were very well publicised, and on that basis, 500 is I think a reasonable response, and obviously those people's responding to it, can rest assured that their details and information that they've imparted and their feelings about this will have no doubt played a part in the assessment of the submission.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Morley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to Councillor Long, the leader, is you say that we get 2 tranches of support from the government. Tranche 1, £2.7 million, tranche 2, 1.3 million, total of 4 million. Is that money going to be totally allocated to our finances, or is some of that money allocated to those 2 companies within the borough who are asking for rate relief or financial support through grants?
No, Mr. Mayor, for clarification, there are other funding streams that have paid for grants. By comparison, we've paid out in excess of £40 million in grants to businesses already and continue to do so. In fact, as Councillor Dark made reference to earlier, additional grant funding has literally been paid out, every week this week and last week and so on. There's various schemes that have come forward. I think during the period of the pandemic, there's a total of 19 different schemes for assistance that our department within revenues and benefits have had to attend to. That's a mixture of support for business and for individuals. And to add to the discussion that we had earlier about help with people with council tax support, we have spent over £400,000 in government grant funding, supporting those most vulnerable people, not by any form of means test or request, but a physical reduction in council tax bill for a number of people of £150. Some, of course, that would have made their bill zero.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Have you a supplementary, Councillor?
Yes, please. I look forward to receiving the figures from the Finance Department, because I find it I'm rather pleased that the collection fund will be down. The collection fund is the amount of money we collect in from individual house taxes and from non-domestic revenues. That must be down because of business rates being reduced. Also, we're losing £3.4 million of revenue from our services. But however, we are drawing down from our general reserves 0.4 million less than we actually planned. So there's been an upturn in a way in our forecast, and I look forward to seeing those figures to support Councillor Long's prediction that he's just made. So I look forward to that, and thank you. And thank you for bringing this to the attention of the council when we've been bereft of any financial figures for as long as I've been elected a member here. Thank you.
I think there was a question there, Councillor Long. So
yeah, there was. But I do. I mean, I welcome some of Councillor Morley's comments, and obviously dispute some of the others. I think within the sphere of that we find ourselves operating in, I, having been involved in local government for as long as I have as an elected councillor, appreciate that those working within the finance department have had other things to do rather than keep us updated with reports on how things are going, and I thank them for their professional way in which they have kept the financial show on the road, whilst there has been massive movements within our predicted budget, far in excess of anything I've ever seen previous in any year. So,
thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Joyce, a question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is the leader assured, albeit to the left of him, that Labour will be shoulder to shoulder with him to try and have some common sense and postpone the county council elections and the police commissioners elections until we are out of this pandemic, especially as the Prime Minister has said this pandemic could go, or this lockdown could go on until summer. So is it just assured that we will be with him shoulder to shoulder, although of course we will be on the left shoulder?
Mr. Mayor, I absolutely welcome that question stroke offer of support from Councillor Joyce. I think elections are critically important things. Democracy, for me, is vitally important, and obviously the election process is the pinnacle of that, and of course accepting the result when you get it is also part of that process, which we've failed perhaps to see recently from an outgoing president in the USA. Having said that process for democracy and that cost that it is shouldn't come at the cost of putting anybody's life at risk through the COVID pandemic. And for that reason, thank you, Charles. I do accept your support for that, and would hope and urge each and every councillor to raise their concerns if they, like me, receive surveys, lobbying, etc. I don't know, and I obviously stood for election numerous times now. I don't know how people could stay safely in a polling station from before 7 in the morning when it opens till 10 o'clock at night and be safe. And if anyone can demonstrate that to me and to our staff here and the people that work for us, I will accept that. But at this point in time, I cannot see it, and I'll obviously, as I said, welcome that support.
Thank you, Councillor Long. There's no more questions on here. There's no more questions on chat, so we'll move on to item 9, members' question time. Members of the council may ask any question to the chair of any council body except the cabinet. Any questions for the chairs, please? Any questions for chairs of council bodies? Do you see any? No? In that case, I thank you for your attention and declare the meeting closed. Good night, Council.